He was going to send a sign if he found anything, so I waited. Next time I see Sheriff Holston is with the rest of the silo when he goes out to clean. Then, the mayor gives me this.
Truth. You think that's a sign?
I don't know.
As Juliette ascends to the top level to start her new job as sheriff, she passes through the mid-levels where she grew up. This triggers a flood of memories, causing her to reminisce about her childhood and the events that led her to move to the lower levels. She starts recalling the day when her dad, Pete, sent her to recycling with her brother and mother's items after their untimely deaths. After taking the items to recycling, Juliette returns home where she has an argument with her dad, as she believes that he's responsible for her mom's death, and he's unable to convince her otherwise. Later that night, deciding that she doesn't want to spend any more time with him, Juliette sneaks out of their apartment. Realizing that she has a knack for fixing broken things, she makes her way down to Mechanical, where she heads to Martha's shop. Knowing that since she's still a child and Martha would therefore ask for her dad's approval to move to Mechanical, Juliette hands her a fabricated note with her dad's signature. After reading the note, Martha realizes that it's a fake, as the word mechanical is misspelled. This leads Martha to inform Pete, who promptly goes down to Mechanical in hopes of talking Juliette into going back up with him. However, when he realizes that his daughter is happier down there, he allows her to stay. Seeing potential in Juliette, Martha assigns her as Knox's shadow. Back in the present, Juliette is suddenly approached by a porter, a person whose job is to deliver messages around the silo. The porter informs her that there has been an accident and leads her to the mayor's office. Once inside, Juliette sees Bernard, Marnes, and Robert Sims, who is the head of security for the judicial department. All three men look distressed, with Marnes in particular seeming completely devastated and unable to hold his emotions, as Mayor John's body is lying dead on the floor. Disturbed by what she's seeing, Juliette asks them what happened, prompting Marnes to frantically yell that someone must have put rat poison in the mayor's food when the lights were out the previous night. Bernard tries to calm Marnes down before introducing himself to Juliette, who informs him that she already knows who he is. Bernard then explains that according to the pact, if the mayor passes away, the head of IT is to assume the position of acting mayor until a new one is elected. With a reassuring tone, he promises her that as soon as he's sworn in as mayor, he will swear her into her new role as sheriff. Later that day, Juliette arrives at the sheriff's department and takes a seat in her new office. Once settled, she's interrupted by Sandy, a longtime clerk in the department who hands her the keys to both the department and Holston's sheriff apartment, where she will be living from now on. While listening to Sandy, Juliette can't help but notice that she seems displeased with her for some reason. When confronted about it, Sandy reveals that she's uncomfortable with Juliette being sheriff, as she's from the lower levels and therefore must be unworthy of this esteemed position. After a brief debate between them, Juliette asserts her authority as Sandy's new boss by commanding Sandy to search for George's file and hand it over to her as soon as possible. Later that day, Bernard visits Holston's apartment, which is now Juliette's. Upon entering, he informs her that he's there to officially swear her in. Before he starts, Juliette tells him she finds it ironic that he's swearing her in as sheriff, when he's the one that's been accusing her of being a thief. When he confronts her by saying that she did steal heat tapes that were meant for IT, she explains that she didn't steal them, but rather appropriated them, as they were needed in Mechanical. The next day in the sheriff's office, Sandy informs Juliette that Judicial told her they don't have a file on George. However, she tells Juliette that Holston did leave a file for her. When Juliette empties the file, she finds some documents and a note that reads, "Double the flowers in front of the mirror." Before she can further investigate, Juliette is informed that Marnes has gotten into a fight with a man whom he's accusing of poisoning Johns. Juliette promptly heads to the level where Marnes is and stops him from beating up the man. She then takes him to the cafeteria and tries to calm him down. Knowing that Marnes doesn't trust her, Juliette reveals to him the real reason she decided to become sheriff. telling him that she's trying to find the truth about George's death. This leads to her and Marnes making a deal to help each other discover who killed George and Johns. Marnes decides that the first person they should talk to is Doris Kennedy, as she might have information that could help them. They go to her and her husband's apartment and start knocking on the door. Soon after, Doris's husband Patrick passes by them and tells them that there are 2 reasons they're wasting their time knocking on that door, expecting Doris to open. The first reason is that Doris has been dead for a year, thanks to Marnes framing her for a crime she didn't commit. Before Patrick gets to the second reason, Marnes taunts him by saying that his wife is dead because she married him, causing Patrick to angrily punch him on the nose. Later that night, Sims visits Marnes in his apartment and informs him that Judge Meadows is ready to send Juliet back down to Mechanical and assign Paul Billings as the new sheriff. However, Marnes, now realizing that Juliet is his best hope in finding out what happened to Johns, suggests keeping her as sheriff. In the evening, Juliet walks past the cafeteria and notices a man sitting alone, gazing at the outside world through the displays. As she approaches him, they introduce themselves to each other. The man's name is Lucas Kyle, and he impresses Juliet when he recognizes that her name comes from a famous play, Romeo and Juliet. When she asks what he's doing that late in the cafeteria, he explains that he enjoys observing the night sky, as he's noticed that the lights in it seem to follow certain unchanging patterns, which he starts pointing out to her. On her way back to her apartment, Juliet is contacted by Martha through a prohibited radio that she devised to infiltrate the deputies' radios. Marnes, who can't go to sleep, overhears them through his own radio. However, instead of being angry at Juliet for allowing Martha to commit this crime, he permits it, as Juliet tells Martha that she considers him a possible ally. Before ending their conversation, Martha informs Juliet that she wants her to come down to Mechanical soon, so she can show her the progress she's made on the camcorder. After the conversation with Martha, Juliet hears a rattling noise coming from the air vent in her apartment. Curious, she opens it to investigate the source of the noise. To her surprise, she discovers a string inside. After pulling on it, she finds that it's attached to George's file, and realizes that Holston must have hidden the file there for her to find. Late that night, Marnes returns to his apartment to get some rest. However, as soon as he enters, he's ambushed by a man who was hiding inside. During their brutal and bloody fight, Marnes tries to reach for his shotgun, but the other man manages to grab it first and aims it at him, leaving Marnes defenselessly in front of the stranger.